Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah Lambert, career and interview coach and founder of Relaunch Me, where we help you find the work that you were meant to do. Hello, everyone. Great to have you back for episode 40 of the Relaunch Your Career podcast. Today, I am speaking with an old colleague of mine and a friend and a seasoned recruiter, Murray Noble from Noble People. Murray has been helping CFOs and CEOs build great finance teams for over 3 decades and has helped over 1,000 candidates further their careers. Great to have you on the show, Murray.
Thank you, Leah. That's a lovely introduction. We do go back a fair way.
A long way. We had a good time back then too, Miles.
For sure.
So look, Murray, you might have seen from some of my social media posts recently that Seek has recently done some research around why people lie in interviews. And the results that have come back were quite surprising, that apparently 3 in every 5 candidates admit to lying in interviews. So based on this research, the top 4 lies that people tell in interviews were as follows. So 23% lie about time off between jobs, 23% lie about personal weaknesses, 23% lie about the reason for leaving their past job, and 21% lie about having a passion or interest in the opportunity that they are interviewing for. So look, my first instinct is always to tell people to be upfront and honest, to learn from any mistakes or any weaknesses that they've come across. So I wanted to get you, Murray, to give us, I guess, a perspective from a recruiter's point of view. So in your experience, do you believe that many candidates are actually telling little white lies in their interviews?
I think that would be very fair to assume that is the case, and Seek do have a capacity to talk to a lot of people. So I wouldn't doubt those figures. It's a reflection of society. Everybody is promoting, everybody is stretching. It starts from the top. We're getting inundated from Craig Kelly on SMS messages about what's happening in the Australia misinformation. Zali Steggall in the press yesterday was talking about how apparently you are allowed to lie on political campaigns, but not if it affects voting. I mean, if these people are telling us it's okay and leading by example, it's part of society. And recruiters naturally have to take that into consideration, try and see through it. There's a balance of accepting, and you have to be naturally cynical as a recruiter because of these sort of statistics, which makes it bloody tough and to deal with people. But it's a society that there is an acceptance of a form of stretching the truth, like it or not.
So you've been interviewing candidates for 30 years now. You should be pretty good at detecting a lie. Do you feel like it's pretty easy to know when someone's stretching the truth?
Oh, I think I'm pretty good at it. I think my radar's pretty strong, but I know that I've been lied to. I know that people have pulled the wool over my eyes, and it's happening all the time. And I catch it a lot. I question it a lot. Sometimes it can be acceptable, and sometimes it's okay. And I've had situations. There's a guy that I worked with many years ago that I was involved in recruiting to work in the same company that I was working in, and he was a great candidate, and we employed him, and we became peers, we became mates, and he's very, very successful. He went on now, and he started a business that sold for 9 figures. He's very, very successful, and I had a chat to him after 4 or 5 years of him being in the business, and he said, all those questions you asked me to interview, Murray, I made up 70% of the answers. And I said, mate, great, good on you. I don't care, because if you made them up, it showed me how quickly you could think, how you would react in those situations, and you delivered on those. So good on you for being smart enough to be that quick. But it showed me that if you were in a certain situation, you knew how you would handle it, regardless of how you told me to interview. And whether even the fact that the interview you told me you'd been in that situation, you hadn't. Fine. Yeah, you got away with it, and it worked out best for everybody, including you and me and the company. It happens.
So look, I guess that situation, someone lied and they were able to live up to those lies. But
Sure.
I guess, where things can go wrong is where people perhaps stretch the truth. For example, they might say that they've had project management experience when they've only perhaps supported a project manager. Do things go wrong sometimes when people stretch the truth?
Yeah, for sure. It can. And that natural cynicism that recruiters have and employers have certainly kicks in. But there are ways around putting some measures or gauging the strength of that embellishment. For instance, Excel is an example, Microsoft Excel. People who talk about being advanced. Well, okay, well, what do you mean by advanced? I call someone who can write VBA or get involved in SQL, people who write macros, they're advanced. And those people will say that they don't know much. So it's all about comparisons. I'll ask people, when you say advanced, what sort of things can you do that you find challenging or difficult, but with a little bit of thinking, a little bit of planning, you can get away with? Can you write? Can you adjust macros? Can you record macros? Can you pivots, VBA? Can you do VLOOKUPs? Because that's something you can do with your eyes closed. Oh, yeah, that's great. What about macros? No. Okay, well, that gives me a gauge of what you can actually do, regardless of what you tell me you can do, because everyone has different understanding of what good is or advanced is. So you can certainly look into those things. But some of the intangible stuff is very hard to pick up.
Yeah. Okay. So one of those statistics was around people lying about the time they've had off between jobs. Sure. Why do you think people feel that they need to lie about this, about having a career break?
Pride. Some feel embarrassed. Some feel it'll look better. I think there's a whole lot of reasons, and every one of them is different, and everyone's situation is different. It's very topical at the moment. It has been for the last 12, 18 months, where people are having breaks. Some of them are forced. Some of them are furloughed. Some of them are completely no fault of their own. And people do get embarrassed by it. And you've got to walk a mile in their shoes, and egos are being hit. But there are people who are caring for partners or for family. Homeschooling is a huge one. There are people who, I know professional couples where people have left roles because they've got, you've got 3 young kids, I've got 2 kids. You can't, it's bloody hard to be able to homeschool kids at a young age where if you're both working long hours. So there's nothing wrong with having a break. I think it's adjusted over the last 18 months where that's acceptable. And companies or employers that don't accept that, I'll be questioning their style, except questioning their culture and their intent. If they've got a problem with someone who's had a challenging 2021 because they've had to look after their children or work from home or take a less than full-time role or take a step back, and people are doing that. And you've got to take every single situation individually, Leah, and not make assumptions, because often those reasons are very, very good reasons.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. And look, one of the silver linings I feel from COVID-19 is that it will be more accepted that people can have a career break, that they can still learn things about themselves and be a better employee in the future as a result of having that time off.
We're also taking a step back as well. There are plenty of people, and I've got a meeting today with a guy that I've known for years and I've placed previously, and he's probably worth 50% more in salary to the role that we're talking about today. But his partner's a very, very high flyer and works the long hours. They've got young kids. He's more than happy to take a step back and work in a role, and then his title will change, and there'll be a stigma around him accepting a different title. And we've already had that discussion, and he doesn't have an ego, and his family is a priority. My client's going to love that, and they've got no problem with that, and they will get good value for money, which is a bit crass to put a term like that on him, but he will love it. They will love it, and if you can't see past that, then that's the cultural problem of an employer. If they can't see they're going to get someone who's quite beneficial and is in the role for the right reasons.
Yeah, and look, I think it's obviously, as a recruiter, it's your job to sell that to the client rather than being thinking that person is a flight risk, someone who's going to be bored in 6 months and is going to leave. Because I know also with many of my clients, they feel exactly the same way. They, as a result of COVID, have spent more time with their family, they've spent more time with their kids at home, and they realise that they don't perhaps want to go back to a job with lots of travel or lots of long hours.
Yeah.
spend in the office. So,
and I recruit in that mid-senior market where most of the candidates I deal with are in their 30s and 40s, and their priorities have changed. They've got kids, and they realise I'm not going to be the CFO of BHP, and you know what? I'm comfortable with that. I'm cool with that. So it is part of my criteria and part of my role as a recruiter is to open up clients' expectations around what if you get someone who's at this stage of their career and they live in Pakenham, your role's in Hallam, and they're sick. They don't want to drive back to the city, and yeah, they'll work 1 day a week less by not commuting every single day. Sure, that's worth 30 grand to them.
Yeah. Okay, this is a tricky one, Muz. So yep. And this is one that comes up a lot. So, you know, I meet a lot of people who have left previous jobs. They might have had a really, really negative experience, really toxic work culture, really terrible boss, and possibly have had to leave because of the impact on their mental health. And, you know, often this can affect people for quite a significant period.
Yes.
Again, often people feel like they need to lie about this. What would you recommend? What sort of approach would you recommend someone take? You know, we tell people don't badmouth your previous boss, don't badmouth your previous company, but they've truly had a very negative experience. How do they explain that to you?
Yeah, very good question. It's once again, each case is different. Each person is different. Each scenario is different, and each situation that person's been involved with is different. So, should they communicate it? Yes, but how they communicate it is really important, and it's very important to have the rapport with the candidate that they feel comfortable with sharing parts. And I've got no problem with a candidate saying, "Look, there's 2 reasons. There's 3 reasons to every story. There's 2 reasons. There's the official reason and how I feel, and I'm happy to share both with you. But obviously, if you feel that, and then the intent, I think, of someone sharing that is important, because if there's any indication or any hint or any chance that situation could arise in this potential employer, well, tell us now. Tell us now. If you left a company because they wanted you to work, or they wanted you to travel, or they wanted you to work these hours, or the boss was like this, well, if I know as a recruiter that the employer has got some of those traces, intricacies about them, or they've got certain aspects about that would put you in the same spot, I'll cut it off now. I'm not going to set myself up for failure, let alone the candidate or the client. I don't have a problem with people explaining 2 reasons, purely if it avoids the situation happening again. And I think these days, Leah, I like how, as a society, we're more comfortable with people explaining non-tangible aspects of why things don't work out. And I think it's more acceptable, especially with men who are happy to share a bit more. So I see a lot of egos being put aside. I see a lot of honest conversations. I have a lot of honest conversations now that perhaps wouldn't have happened 2-3 years ago. So if it's worth sharing to avoid the situation happening again, great. But just make it clear to the recruiter that, look, I'll tell you some parts. And if they want to pry, then that's up to you to decide as a candidate whether you want to do that or not. But I'd certainly make sure it's relevant if you're going to ask that question, potential employee or someone that you are interviewing.
Yeah, I guess the approach I always recommend is talk about, I guess, what sort of environment you feel you need as a candidate. You know, I'm looking for an environment that's collaborative and harmonious and supportive. That's why I've applied for this role. I'm hoping that I will find that environment in your company, rather than saying all the negative things about where you've come from.
Yeah, that's a great way of doing it, Leah, for sure. And that's relevant to things like salary. You know, do you ask about salary? Don't you ask about salaries in interviews? Well, I know the market well enough I can gauge what people are probably on within 5-10% of what they're on. I know what the market rate is, and I know what my client's looking to pay, and people will sometimes tell the truth, sometimes they won't. I'll often ask about what people are on, and I'll ask what they're looking for within a range, because no one should narrow down what someone is looking for until they know exactly what the role is like, and they've met the people, and they might walk away and say, I so want this job, I don't care if I get paid X. Or they might come back and say, ooh, I need X plus 20%. You know, these guys are going to be tough.
That brings me to my next question, because many times when candidates go onto a job board and have to apply, they're asked to put in a salary. And I totally agree that how can you say what you are willing to take for this job without knowing what is required of you?
I agree. And I think it's rough. And I was talking to a mate who owns a business the other day about putting screening questions in CCADs. And one of the questions that another recruiter uses is, tell us what salary you're looking for. And I've got a real problem with that, because it's irrelevant in so many ways, and people will hold you to that. And they'll say, well, you told me that you're looking for 140 grand. Yeah, but you also told me that I'll be working 38 hours a week. This role is going to be 50, and you're going to expect blood. So this role is worth 160. The people will get held to that. So I like to keep a range. I like to have a bit of a guide. That's obviously relevant too to telling the truth about what salary people have been on, and that's a big part of what people stretch the truth on, Leah. But again, that's where knowing a market and being deep into a market, I'd also know that I normally can find out pretty quickly what someone should be on by just having a look at some of their peers or people that I know. Or it's not hard to work out what people are on.
I guess on top of that, like obviously I know as the sort of recruiter you are, Murray, that you would do very thorough reference checks. Is that something that you would ask a previous employer what this person's salary was? Is that something you would check in a reference check?
Not directly. I've never asked that as a direct question. You are allowed to. It's not illegal to ask that. But it's like any potential discriminatory question. There's a fine line between, you are allowed to ask a lot of questions as long as you don't use them as the criteria for making a decision. And that's a sort of a grey area that not many people know. So, but I don't ask that question. There are a lot of other questions I'll ask referees, but normally I have an idea of what the market should be paying. So there are people who are getting overpaid. There are people that are getting underpaid. You kind of need to know a market, and that's where I think employers or recruiters who work right across markets who don't have the understanding of what the market should be paying, it's harder for them. But it's such a fluid market. There are so many people being overpaid at the moment. It's hard to gauge anyway. But no, I don't ask an interview. And Charter's a prime example, Leah. I know you're at KPMG, and there's such a lack of people coming into chartered firms from overseas at the moment. There's such a lack of supply of people that the people that are still in these firms, a lot of them are getting overpaid. A lot of them are being promoted early. So the whole market's being skewed completely out of whack for what it was 2 years ago, and it's going to take them years to recover. There are people who are 3-4 year experience who are getting paid 100 grand, 110 grand in these firms. Years ago, they will be on 70.
That's a good time for chartered accountants then.
Well, it is. If you're a 3-4 year experienced chartered auditor at the moment, you write your own ticket.
Maybe I'll go back to tax.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd love to do that, Leah.
Absolutely not. Sorry, I know there's people out there who love tax, but
good on them. Good on them. I meet people who love reconciliations. I meet people who love tax. I meet people who love standards, and I respect that. I'm glad they've found their thing. I meet people who are absolute spreadsheet jockeys, and all they want to do is just ride spreadsheets all day. Good on you. Find your thing.
It's all about using your natural strengths, isn't it? Like things that come naturally. Can you think of any examples, Murray, where a candidate has been caught out by lying in the interview process?
Plenty of times. Plenty of times. It's a shame, and I've taken a couple of breaks in my career where you've got to be naturally cynical to set as a recruiter, and I liken it to every day you go into battle with people, and you get a few good punches in, but every day you get punched back. And as a recruiter, you must get a little punch drunk. You get a little bit of concussion. You've got to take a break once in a while, but you've got to be a little bit cynical with everyone you meet, which is a real challenge. So my radar's up pretty early, and I find that silence is often a good thing when talking to people and interviewing people, and just letting them dig holes. And it happens quite a lot where someone's resume won't match up with their LinkedIn profile. There'll be dates, there'll be titles, there'll be a little bit of blurring, and I've got no qualms asking people about that. And there's been plenty of people that I've spoken to. I've just said, look, mate, which resume should I go by? And that's my way of saying, don't call me again. Seriously. You may have got away in the past. I had a contractor years ago who I introduced to a client who was actually a good mate and still is, and a good mate, good client. And it was a real rush for them. And this guy was available, and we got him in there within 24 hours. And about a month later, the client rang me and said, look, could you just go back and recheck his CPA status? And I'm like, oh, hang on, shivers, did I do that? Because I normally do. I always call the CPAs and CAs, and they're very reliable about confirming. And I went back and we couldn't find a record of this guy. And then I rang him and said, look, mate, you're doing a great job. I'm just trying to go back and cover off some audit things from my perspective. And what's your CPA number? Oh, I'll have to look it up. Oh, I lost the CPA when I moved house. So there was a house fire. And I went back to my client and said, look, I think you're right. What do we want to do? And to his credit, the client said, look, he's doing a good job. We'll just shield him from these things. We won't get him exposed to these things. And he worked for another month and finished up his assignment. And I basically said to him, look, I'm not going to talk to you about any other roles until you produce this bit of paper. I need to clarify this. It's pretty binary. And I never heard from him again. He did a good enough job, but he got away with it. So I've always been really paranoid about checking things like CPA and CA and even references. And not everyone gives references, referees and mobile numbers. I'll go back to their reception and say, don't tell me what Bill Smith's phone number, what his phone number is, but if I read it out to you, confirm it, yes. And is his title CFO? Yes. Social media, just general Googling, you find out what people are really doing. And no recruiter, I think the Andrew Flanagan situation, the Maya liar from 7 or 8 years ago, I think that really put a lot of recruiters into paranoia land, and so they should.
I have had a client in the last couple of years who openly admitted that every job he'd got, he had put down a friend's phone number and briefed his friend to pretend to be the referee, which is concerning. I know when we worked together years ago, we used to go and do face-to-face reference checks. I assume that's obviously something you can't do at the moment, but that was a really good way of finding out really, what that person really thought of the candidate.
Yeah, for sure. And that is an awesome way of doing it. I'd love to do more of it. But yeah, you're right, we can't. And it is a very powerful tool to sit down in front of a referee and have a conversation and to see the visual cues that come from those conversations, which most recruiters are pretty attuned to. And I think it's fantastic. It certainly increases the validity of an assignment, that's for sure.
So, Murray, in Melbourne here, where there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, we're starting to come out of lockdown, hopefully in the next few weeks after a very long time. Can you give us any insights into sort of how the general job market is looking from your perspective as we start to head out of this?
I think a lot of companies over-culled last year, and business is picking up for sure, and it has been during the course of like 6 months or so. Last year was certainly a lot quieter. I had 6 or 7 assignments I was working on March last year, and 5 of them just shut down overnight. And that was pretty tough for every professional person in Melbourne. So no one certainly wasn't alone there. But recruiting is flat out at the moment, absolutely flat out. And I think a lot of it's got to do in my market, which is mid-senior commercial finance professionals. The lack of people coming into the country and lack of immigration is really hurting the qualified accounting market. And if you look at somewhere like a PwC, something like 25% of the people they hire are internationals or laterals. And that tap's just been completely turned off. So no one's coming out the bottom of the funnel or through that organisation into industry that people like myself love to talk to. So employers putting an ad on Seek, the quality and the numbers and the just aren't there. So as recruiters, we're flat out, or good recruiters are flat out, because we know where the people are, we know where to find them, we have the relationships, we have the networks, and there are a lot of companies looking for people because they overculled, they're growing again, they've had the incentives to rebuild. I think it's a very, very busy market for recruiters at the moment. How does that? There are a lot of industries that are still challenged, of course, hospitality, retail, tourism, but they're going to pick up really quickly, I hope. But it's also employees and people are working smarter, so they're going to be more selective. Look, it's going to be busy another 12, 18 months. I can't see why recruiters won't be flat out, and there's going to be good opportunities out there for people, especially with the immigration taking a long time to gear up again. So good people will always get good roles, Leah. So
still a good time for people to be looking by the sounds of things, even though we're not out of lockdown as yet.
No, I think it's always a good time to look. Yeah, employers say, it's a really bad time. It's always a bad time for someone to resign. but it's always a good time to look for a role. It's always a good time to listen to an opportunity. And if you're approached by a recruiter professionally, always listen. You never know when a great role is going to be presented. And you'd be really kicking yourself if you found out it was a dream role, but you didn't give them the time of day. As long as the approach is professional. And even December and January, I've been doing this long enough to know that December, January is probably still 60% of a normal month. Recruitment doesn't shut down for 3 months. It just subsides a bit. And I hope I'll get a week or two off myself, but it's always a good time to listen. You just never know when that right role's out there.
Good advice, Murray. And it'll be interesting to see, I think, what happens over this summer, because I guess recruitment slowed down often because the big decision makers are overseas on holidays or taking the whole month off. It'll be interesting to see, with I guess some people may be able to start overseas travel. We don't really know yet whether that will, or, whether it will slow things down as much as usual.
Yeah, good point. You're right. People are more accessible. Decision makers are more accessible, but that's also a trap and for them. And as you know, I think a lot of people are pretty tired. I know a lot of people are tired, and I hope a lot of people will turn their phones off and not turn them off for a week and a half. But companies still need to hire. I think the next 8 weeks will be flat out while people get ready to gear up and have people come back into the office next year, or at least start transitioning back into an office or whatever the hybrid version there is of. But I think there's still good roles out there, and there's still a really big challenge to find good people.
Just finally, Murray, any other specific advice that you would have for job seekers who are starting to commence their job search right now?
I think we've got to be resilient, be reliable, be really cognizant of balancing your desire to impress and be reliable with not being too aggressive when dealing with an employer or a recruiter. It's a real fine line, and I think there are a lot of recruiters don't have empathy to candidate situations, and I think that you need to find a recruiting partner that you feel comfortable with sharing with and who will represent you. Good people always get roles. It may take a little bit longer, but the right role, you'll always find a role. As graduates, you remember, Leah, what it's like. How am I going to get a job? What am I going to do? I graduated during a recession. My parents grew up with, I remember my parents had 18, 19% interest rates in their home. How are we going to pay off a home? You do. Just be resilient, be patient. The right role will come about. Be prepared to take a slight adjustment in an opportunity if you can see that the company is right, the next role is in that organisation, or you will get the skills in that role to take the next step. Always work one step ahead. And I think just be patient. Be patient. Good roles are out there. It's just a real challenge to compete for them.
Good advice, Murray. And just finally, one more question. If someone is interested in connecting with you, can you just tell us a little bit about your specialised area of recruitment and the sort of candidates and clients you'd be interested to talk to?
Sure. Noble People is my business, noblepeople.com.au, or you'll find me on LinkedIn, Murray Noble. I'm always happy to talk to people, and my market is I recruit mid-senior commercial finance people. So they're normally mid-career, generally 100 to 250K roles, the qualified accounting people, and commercial opportunities, commercial organisations. So I don't recruit into the financial services sector. I stay away from government. People I work with are people that I want to talk to. That's easily described by people that are comfortable having a conversation, people that I have to explore. All of my clients are people I've dealt with as candidates. Look after people on the way up, and they'll look after you, and it's not hard to treat people well. So always happy to have a conversation with people, Lee. You never know where it leads.
And that does not surprise me, Murray. I know what your approach is, and you always do provide excellent candidate care. So many others in the industry would learn a lot from you.
Well, I'm an old campaigner, as you said, Leah. Maybe it's a bit old school, but I sleep well at night, and I enjoy helping people out, and I still get a big kick from hearing how I've helped someone create a better life for themselves.
Exactly. Look, Murray, it's been always a pleasure to talk to you. You've shared some great insights. So thanks for coming on the podcast, and wish you well for the rest of the year.
Good on you. Thanks, Leah. Appreciate it. You too.
hope you enjoyed this episode of Relaunch Your Career. If you did, please subscribe, share with your friends, leave a review, or connect with us on social media at Relaunch Me Career Consulting. If you have any questions about the episode or the work that we do, then contact us via the website relaunchme.com.au. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.